And welcome to the Monkey House, everyone, on WVUM 90.5 FM, The Voice. I'm your host, Israel, and today I am joined by WVUM's music director and the host of Electric Kingdom Live, Peter. How are you?
Hello, everyone. How's it going on this October evening?
Yeah. By the way, you did an excellent set yesterday night with Cedric.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Shout out to Cedric Livingston, another WVMer and a longtime DJ, doing some, all original techno work. Some really, really interesting stuff. He's great. And, that's the type of stuff I like to have on the show, just really original, local electronic music.
Wonderful. And thank you all for joining us today. You may immediately notice that something is a little different here. And he's not here. He's actually listening in, most likely from Puerto Rico. And, we wish him well. And we'd also like to wish well everyone who was affected in the Florida Panhandle, everyone in Alabama, everyone in Georgia, everyone in the Carolinas. And if any of you are tuning in from these areas, happy to have you here.
Absolutely. It's I lived in the Panhandle for a number of years.
Really?
And I still have good friends who do live there. And I just, I hope everyone's all right. I have a feeling everyone's all right. There's people are pretty resilient there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Even though places like Mexico Beach took quite of a beating.
Yeah,
is what I saw.
Yeah, unfortunately, but I think people have a capacity to bounce back from these sorts of things, and it just look what happened with us down here and Andrew. We haven't had anything close to as catastrophic of death toll.
Right.
Even with that, so. Yeah, I think, obviously it's a tragedy, but, I think that the consequences are going to be, more minimal than major.
Mm.
So I have faith in that.
Right. That's good. Anyways, to those of you who tune in regularly to the Monkey House, you probably know what we do. We talk about issues, and we talk about something that may scare some of you more than any bit of what we're going to be talking about today. Politics. And, we're really, for today's episode, we're actually going to be sharing some stories. In light of the month of October, in light of, the lights are out here in the studio and everything.
That's right, it's dark here. Usually, we have we have windows everywhere. There's a set of honeycomb windows that envelops half of the studio itself. Very rare for a college station. Most college stations are located in dungeons that are built below ground.
I've always heard that. But I kind of came in thinking that we would be in some sort of dungeon or not. But
no,
we're actually quite in the open, really.
It's very much the opposite. Yeah, we have a view of the main entrance to campus, a direct view.
Yeah, pretty much.
And everything, and it's great. I mean, I think it's a good thing. I think it lends itself a sense of transparency.
Oh yeah.
That I like. I don't like the radio to be off-putting, or I don't want this to seem like some sort of secret club that only meets in a in a discreet location underground.
Sure.
But yeah, normally it's a very positive place to, broadcast from. So it's kind of funny that we have to make an extra effort to make it seem spookier or more dungeon-like.
All right, 'tis the season, as they say.
Yeah, it is the season.
And of course, we need something to drown out the noise in Washington.
Absolutely.
We talk about it every week,
and it's
it's
maddening, honestly. I've even heard of people, having a spike in therapy because of just the madness that goes on ever since the ever since Trump was elected into office, there's been this huge spike.
Well, we hope this will prove to be just as therapeutic. So if you guys are into that sort of thing, if you're into having your hairs raised, feel free to stick around, and of course, feel free to text in at any point at 786-309-8861. And with that, I think we'll get started.
Yes.
I came in wanting to tell a story that I've been telling all my friends about, my parents, for a while, because it was something that I was personally quite invested in and enthusiastic in earlier this year. And I imagine that there's a lot of radio enthusiasts tuning in right now. A lot of shortwave radio enthusiasts, and to those of you who don't know what shortwave radio is, it's basically something that uses higher frequencies, so you can essentially listen to frequencies from all over the world. I could listen to the Voice of Korea if I wanted to. I could listen to French morning radio. Just about anything. Then the possibilities are quite endless, or at least nearly so. And so it's a fascinating tool, but also one that attracts a lot of intrigue and mystery. For one thing that you'll probably notice is that when you tune into certain frequencies, you'll hear little packets of data, little packets of information being transferred from who knows where, and it's deafening almost, although relatively inconsequential. However, if you're tuned into the right frequency at the right time in the right place, you may hear what sounds like numbers. And sometimes these numbers are followed by a melody of sorts. As you can hear in this clip, which is colloquially known as Cherry Ripe. It is said to have been coming from Australia. It's no longer active on shortwave radio, but enthusiasts have been monitoring these so-called number stations for decades. It's said to have been appeared since the late 60s, early 70s, and for one, it's interesting to me to hear these sounds coming out of the radio. These strange, numbers and everything. But, one of the eerie parts of it, of course, is that they're being read out by a synthetic voice of sorts. It seems strangely inorganic, almost alien, and just seems rather strange. And, of course, coupled with that melody right there, kind of like this little music box melody, you're in for a treat. Although some of these number stations tend to differ. Sometimes you'll hear numbers being read out loud, usually in orders of 5. But sometimes you'll hear Morse code. Sometimes you'll hear just little bleeps and bloops here and there. And they've attracted the enthusiasm and intrigue of shortwave radio enthusiasts for decades, but nobody knows what any of it means. To this day, to my knowledge, no one has ever decoded any one of these number stations. And right now, let me just play a little excerpt of perhaps the most well-known number station, the Lincolnshire Poacher. Now, folks have been tracking the Lincolnshire Poacher for decades, and it's said to have come from a British air base in Cyprus. And that's the interesting thing about these number stations right here, actually, is that many folks have speculated that they're being used to transmit information to agents in different countries, espionage, essentially. Though no government has ever claimed ownership of these stations, no government will even acknowledge that they exist. They're just out there, and shortwave radio enthusiasts have been trying to decode one of the biggest mysteries in radio in history. Now, you may say, oh, it's just Cold War paranoia that's fueling these notions of government, big brotherly like, spying from country to country. And perhaps that's the case. Perhaps it really is nothing. Just nothing more but a fantasy. However, and this story actually brings us a little closer to home. In the late 90s, there were 5 Cuban spies who were arrested and tried for espionage. And one of the points of evidence that they actually used, that the FBI actually used to convict these spies, was a number station. The first time a number station has ever been used to convict anyone of espionage, the first time, essentially, a number station has ever been acknowledged to be associated with what everyone has been speculating about for decades. Let me play a little bit of that.
Atención, 3, 8, 9, 5, 9, 0, 4, 4, 7, 3, 3, 8, 9, 5, 9.
And again, nobody knows what it means. These 5 Cuban spies, I believe, have since been extradited back to Cuba. So that's a separate story. And there, it's such, there's so much to unravel, I feel, in the world of number stations. And the reason why I brought it here to this program, to the Halloween special, is because some of these clips, to me, at least what I found back when I first found these stations in March, can be somewhat off-putting. Not just because of the quality of the audio, I mean, that's the kind of stuff you hear in lo-fi all the time, but because of the content, because of the synthesized voice reading, and because of these little eerie little memories that, melodies that you almost feel were intentionally put there to turn people off from finding out more about it. That's me speculating right there. But let me just play another example called Gong Station Chimes. Now, it's speculated that that particular clip has come out of East Germany in the 80s, actually, back when East Germany was actually still a thing. But you go deeper into it. And at one point, I became numb to all of it. I would listen to the Lincolnshire Poacher and sometimes hum along to the melody because it is that subliminal. And one can only imagine what these, spies from across the world think when they hear this, but really, it's fascinating. Let me play another one, actually. This is probably the second most known one behind the Lincolnshire Poacher. This is the Swedish Rhapsody. Demented Little Ice Cream Truck, I suppose, is the title you could attribute to that. But it really is, the possibilities are really endless with number stations, and I guess that's why it's so fun to speculate about them. And let me just note, you can listen to number stations right now. That's the thing. Even though number stations have gradually decreased in volume over the past few years now that the Cold War is over, there's plenty of them that are still out there. You just need to have a shortwave radio, which there are actually plenty of nifty online websites that are out there just for that purpose. Tune into the right frequency at the right time, because some of these number stations operate at a very rigid schedule, and listen to your heart's content, essentially. You can essentially play detective from your own little home with a shortwave radio, and it could be enjoyable, it could be horrifying, but above all, it is interesting and horrifying.
Yeah, I gotta admit, this is very creepy. It's there's just so many things that entered my mind of just listening to those few samples. I think just from my initial impression, what really makes it scary is how just kind of like, hard to decipher it is, how alien, because if we have a sense of familiarity with something, it's, I would think it's a little harder to be, just kind of driven mad by it in the same way. This is scary in a different way that, like, losing a, loved one is scary, or developing like a sort of disease is scary. This is like a sort of existential fright, because it's kind of like leading you to question your own, reality in a sense. And these are, and it's just, they play on like such a specific set of qualities that like really, make you, mad. It's like the childlike melodies.
Yeah.
The childlike melodies, and not only that, the fact that they're broadcasting from such a medium as shortwave radio.
Yeah.
It distorts them to a point where it almost seems like, oh, this is coming from some sort of other world.
Of course.
It's and the thing is, nobody knows, what the numbers mean.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows what the numbers mean, and that's I think that's frightening in and of itself, because I could see, as I'm sure has already happened, enthusiasts spending decades of their life trying to, like, having all sorts of charts and trying to figure out
listening to hours on
the grand conspiracy. And I think it's a bit comic if it were all to just be, just an elaborate kind of joke between nations.
Right.
That would be,
or something that's intentionally meant to distract the listener, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really interesting point, because this is tied to, whether justified or not, to Cold War, era tactics. And, a bit like the reason it's called a Cold War in the first place is because it was a war, kind of,
quite chilly.
It was quite chilly, but also, it wasn't fought with a fire or anything. It wasn't fought on the front lines. And an interesting, tactic for that is, distraction. And we use it today in our own media to detract from, certain anti-war sympathies, etc. And I'm just trying to figure out, if you were the type of person who was really obsessed with short-form radio, you would probably be the type of person who would, be interested in, espionage to begin with.
Right.
And somebody interested in espionage, is dangerous, because nobody is supposed to be interested in espionage. On the books, espionage is not supposed to exist.
Right.
Now, as to whether or not these stations are tied to espionage, that just presents a further set of questions.
Yeah.
Because if this is espionage, which, I think we can agree is supposed to be done like in the shadows, right? It's not supposed to be something that's like broadcast.
Yeah.
Why would they be literally broadcasting these these stations that would, supposedly help, a spy who knew the right way to decipher these. But that also leads me to believe that they might be arbitrary, because surely they can't be so complex that so many people have just failed to crack the code. That there's only one set of people who could actually crack the code.
Former spies.
Even former spies haven't cracked the code. We're assuming, because nobody.
Perhaps they keep changing the code.
But we can track that though, right? Many of these number stations have been going on in what I assume is the exact same format.
Yeah, it's tough. Definitely the average listener can't make anything out of it. The same numbers being repeated over and over.
But then again, it's the
intrigue.
I'm generalizing here, but the obsessive nature of somebody who frequently tunes into shortwave radio,
right,
would definitely lend itself to the type of person who would either be interested in espionage, be interested in sort of peeling back the curtain, or be a spy themselves.
Though interestingly enough, all of these samples for the number stations were actually gotten off of what is known as the Conet Project, which was an endeavor to capture as many number stations as possible on shortwave radio, and essentially put them, I think, in 4 CD form for everyone to listen to. And there have actually been some acts who have used these samples. I think Wilco would happen to be the most popular example.
That's right, yeah.
Yankee Hotel Foxtrot.
Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, yeah, that's a classic album. Really leads... Wilco is always in their earlier career, they had kind of a sinister undertow, with albums like Yankee Foxtrot and Ghost is Born. Obviously, they kind of shed that, in their more recent work. They came out with the album Star Wars that they just dropped for free, and Wilco Schmilco.
Golly.
But yeah, for a while there, they were just a tad spooky, just a little bit, and yeah, and that one is that's also a good album, because that's also call letters too. So
right.
that has that sort of military.
It also kind of has that foreboding mystique, sort of sinister curiosity almost.
Yeah. Nobody really talks like that anymore, and I think that's what makes it strange that these are still out there.
Right.
And nobody could trace these. Nobody could trace where.
Well, they've been able to trace the locations, for example. The Lincolnshire Poacher was traced from Cyprus.
Okay. Do these locations make sense as something that would be tied to espionage?
We'll never know.
Because I know Cyprus seems like an odd location.
It was in a British air base in Cyprus.
That makes it even more suspicious, because Britain, at least for a time, was a major player in the espionage game.
Of course, man.
And Cyprus is pretty much smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean.
Right.
You have a wide access to both Europe and Africa and the Middle East.
Right, but you still have there's this particularly popular one known as the buzzer that folks know is coming from Russia.
All right, well, where in Russia?
Where in Russia? Well, that's an interesting
Russia's a big...
Yes.
Russia is a very big place, and Russia spans 11 time zones.
I think it was located near the White House. Their White House, actually.
So it isn't that far, because, one can only estimate what happens in the far east of Russia. I do know a lot of, there was a hacker or, some sort of a, computer, either a vigilante or a criminal who took years to get caught because he lived on the border of Mongolia.
Maybe you can tell us about number station.
I think if anybody, would be able to do that, it would be him. But I'm actually surprised it isn't coming from Eastern Russia, because Eastern Russia is where many of the most mysterious aspects of Russia come from. Not only because almost nobody from Russia lives there, the Russians who live there are either sort of native Siberians,
sure,
or just kind of complete outcasts. I believe one of Russia's most notorious prisons, so a prison called the Black Dolphin, is located, to the east. I don't know if it's in Siberia, but it's located in the east, which is supposed to be one of the harshest prisons in the world.
Golly.
It's because why not? Why? Also, after World War II, many Japanese soldiers, who were stationed in China and Korea during the war, were taken to Siberia and put in, labor camps for years. And you could.
Which is probably more scary than anything we're discussing today.
Yeah, because you could debate. Of course, the government they were working for was not exactly without sin by any stretch of the imagination.
Of course,
but
no government is.
Yeah, of course, but it is frightening to be captured by an enemy, and then to be captured by an enemy, then to be in one of the toughest prison camps in the world, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of one of the most isolated areas on Earth, and then where some are just like begging to die because the conditions are so atrocious, and then just being because there were prisoners of war in a certain respect, just being handed back to Japan, and to this day you still have an old population of Japanese people trying to reconcile their role in the war, because you're obviously going to develop some serious PTSD from an experience like that, and most, if not all, countries that undergo an experience like that have such high rates. But I do find it interesting that even besides what the world thinks of that particular moment, they still want to capture as much dignity from that experience as they can.
Of course.
And obviously that's led to conflicts, but it's a question of can you sympathize with a villain?
Yeah.
Or were they villains? Were the Nazis villains? It's the I'm just following orders defense.
Sure, yeah.
Of that, were they villains for that? That's I personally don't think so, but that's just that's just my opinion on the matter. We could talk about the idea of humanizing villains. But there is another, let me get back to Siberia, because that is a particularly scary place. Because there was an event, and I forget the name of it. I'm sorry, I'm so unprofessional right now. But there was an event.
That's what we do.
Nope, that's how it is. That's how it is. There was an event in the early 1900s, the very early 1900s, where in the middle of Siberia, of all places, there was just out of nowhere, a giant flash in the sky that cleared acres and acres of trees.
Really?
Out of nowhere, and for a long time nobody could explain it.
Wow.
It's just this force that just kind of appeared.
Nuclear test.
That's a thing. This was before nuclear tests, though.
Or so they say.
Or so they say. Yeah, that's that would be an ultimate Cold War story.
Yeah.
If nukes were invented in 1892.
A secret government project.
Incredibly secret underground. We're just kind of doling out the information. It was definitely not invented in the 40s.
Someone should write a story on that. Hey.
That'd actually be a good good writing prompt. I just feel like the way I would write it, though, it wouldn't be, because there's a part of me that just does not like steampunk at all, and I feel if you're dealing with this sort of weird retro futurism, and also sort of antebellum aesthetic. You're gonna get like this weird steampunk where like where I don't know where like where I don't know Andrew Johnson like secretly worked on the on the first nuclear bombs, or I don't know who's
Chester.
who's a particularly disliked president of the
Benjamin Harrison.
Benjamin Harrison, Ulysses S. Grant.
Gosh.
Surprisingly hated, actually, Ulysses S. Grant. You'd think that, you know, nowadays if you are like a war hero, and Ulysses S. Grant was like, in some regards, like, you know, the ultimate war hero post George Washington.
Yeah.
So I mean, it is very interesting that he had such an ineffective presidency and was generally very disliked at the end. But yeah, about that flash, it just, you know, it was just a sort of freak phenomena. What generally happened was that there was a sort of like a meteorite, or
well, that would make sense.
But the way it impacted on Earth just made it like
yeah, when
scatter.
I think about the trees being flattened, I would think nuclear test.
Scatter. But I mean, you know, the
Guess we'll never
the
know.
natural world does have the capacity to mimic nuclear, you know, fission to a degree.
Cold War, man.
Cold War. I mean, Cold War. I mean,
Talk about cold.
But it just had to happen in Siberia, and the fact that it happened like smack dab in the middle of Siberia, it almost makes it seem otherworldly, because like no one was there really.
Sure.
Enough people were there where it was reported, and people took pictures of it.
Golly, I really have to look more into this. This is fascinating.
And it's just it's, you know, just tacking on the mystery of this place. And then speaking of Cold War, I mean, I always like, when I think of like Cold War, obviously think of nuclear.
I kind of think of like 1984 sometimes, because I think that captures like the general paranoia.
That's true, but I think that is true, but I just tend to think directly to nukes. That's just
well, I think nukes and propaganda is what I think of.
Yeah, nukes and propaganda, but obviously the Soviet Union was
I also think of like Kennedy and Khrushchev.
Yeah. Obviously the Soviet Union was a very bizarre place from the perspective of other people, and there's a reason it's called the Iron Curtain. Both impenetrable, you know, information wise or physically.
Sure.
But you know, weird things went on in there. And but probably the most well-known, you know, disaster that I always think of, like, wow, this is very creepy, is you know, the Chernobyl disaster. And that happened.
Yeah.
That happened not too long ago. I mean, that happened like in the 80s.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, it happened like in the 80s, and right at the end of the Cold War, pretty much.
Yeah, that was rough.
I mean, it was rough. It did also take attention away from 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island being the second worst nuclear disaster, or meltdown. And, you know, that happened, you know, in the northeast U.S., and actually turned us off from nuclear power. We would have more nuclear power around, more than likely, if 3 Mile Island hadn't happened. So, but with Chernobyl, it's very creepy, because you could visit Chernobyl.
Sure.
You can visit Chernobyl, you know, if you want.
They've made movies about people visiting Chernobyl.
And people live there. Like, people just, because, like, what are you gonna do? You know, it's
plenty of flora and fauna.
Yeah, the thing is, like, yeah, it's actually a really beautiful place, and there's all these, you know, all these flora and fauna, all these creatures that have somehow, they look like they barely changed.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that disaster.
But you know, you take a closer look, and and really you risk getting cancer just by looking at them.
Now, we actually do have some incoming information that may corroborate your earlier claim about
please.
a meteor
Please,
in Siberia.
Yes. Please
Now,
correct
what this
me.
person has to say, and since the text is in pink, I'll just call you Mr. or Mrs. Pink. Hello. Here's what Wikipedia has to say, according to him. The Tunguska event
That's what it is, yeah.
was a large explosion that occurred near the stony Tunguska River in something government, hard to pronounce, Russia, sorry, on the morning of the 30th of June of 1908. The explosion over the sparsely populated eastern Siberian taiga flattened 2,000 square kilometers of forest, yet caused no known human casualties. The explosion is generally attributed to the airburst of a meteor. It's classified as an impact event, even though no impact crater has been found. The object is thought to have disintegrated at an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers rather than to have hit the surface of the Earth.
Yeah, that's I can't believe I was actually pretty close
Yeah.
to my memory. Yeah,
Pays to speculate,
of
man.
course.
Thank you,
yeah,
by
of
the
course,
way,
that
to
was-
whoever texted in.
No, like many thanks to that. That was actually that was the exact event I was thinking of, and that it is true that that an event like that is also scary because there could be a meteor, like many meteors like show up on Earth like every day.
Of course, we never noticed.
We never noticed that.
Not quite as much as the period of bombardment, of course, but still, it's
Yeah, but it only takes one.
Yeah, exactly.
The one that caused the late Cretaceous extinction event was like only 6 miles long. I could drive 6 miles in
That's how the land before time ended, man. No one talks about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I could drive 6 miles in like 8 minutes or so, if I'm going like the speed limit.
Right.
That's and there's still, and the thing that's weird about that too is that obviously that leaves a huge scar on the Earth,
Of course.
but that one is hidden
Is it?
in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So for all intents and purposes, it never happened.
Yeah, we don't talk about it.
We don't really talk about that anymore. It's
That's the secret.
it's
right
a
there.
little too soon.
Too soon, guys.
Too soon since
Too
the
soon.
last. That's a scary thing too. I mean, obviously, extinction, unfortunately, is the fate of all creatures, including ourselves.
Yeah.
But
We don't talk about that. Either.
we don't talk about that. But extinction is the fate of all animals, and we've had about 5, if I recall correctly, major extinction events. But we're actually in the middle of an extinction event right now.
That's what I've heard. Our
That's
6
right.
extinction events.
It's called the Holocene
Right.
extinction event, and it's not normal for so many creatures to just die in one person's lifetime.
Well, now it
Like-
is, I suppose.
And now it is, but to that rate, it takes millions and millions of years of evolution to work to replace the sort of the diversity of species than it does for us to just kind of like toss them aside.
Of course.
And we've there's no major like marsupial carnivores left.
Mm.
There's only the Tasmanian devil,
Yeah.
and Tasmanian devil is a very poor creature.
Only cool in Looney
I
Tunes.
truly no, it's only cool there. Like Tasmanian tigers are outrageously violent.
Yeah.
Like they'll just
just like the Looney Tunes.
yeah, but they just like fight each other, and they're also prone to like the sort of worst facial tumors that you've ever seen on an animal.
Oh god.
So their whole population is just kind of like marred with these
Now that's scary. Jeez.
that it's a very scary thing, and like I feel bad for them because they're just like really wretched creatures.
Hey, they try, man. They pay their taxes. They get along through the day. They try their best.
They do. I hope they try their best. I mean,
Maybe.
like I don't know. Most other marsupials seem pretty docile, but then again, most other marsupials are pretty dumb. I'm sorry to like break it to you,
Kangaroo
but
Jack.
Nope. I'm so, like it's really bad. So koalas have such bad motor coordination that they can't pick up something on a flat surface.
Mm-hmm. Damn. Jeez.
They really can't. They're so fixed to living on trees.
I can imagine.
So I mean that's scary.
It's scary.
extinction.
Yeah, not being
It
able
is-
to pick up things properly.
Not being able to pick up things properly, that's also very scary. But I just find like the extinction, just that's another like existential threat, because it's not going to happen to us. I mean, that would be interesting if we were to just like kind of wipe ourselves out right now.
I
I think
guess that ties back to all the Cold War
I
speculation.
think we have maybe it was like some sort of coded message.
Yeah, maybe
of
the
peace.
number stations are just telling people, hey, let's not nuke each other. How about that? Yeah.
I mean, that could also explain the such childlike major key melodies.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because
yeah.
because we assume as jaded 21st century observers that this is incredibly creepy.
Of course.
But maybe not. There was just a lack of irony. Like, why would they have to be ironic in these number stations? Why couldn't they just?
They've got a sense of humor.
I mean,
they all gotta laugh.
I'm sure they have a
sometimes.
sense of humor, but the main thing also is that they're still jaunty, and I'm sure they would sound much better, and I'm sure we would even have like a completely different perspective on them if they were to play on more
people use them as samples.
on a more clear channel. Like if we were able to just hear them
like a 90.6
exactly
FM,
like
yeah.
a don't first of all don't go representing 90.6.
I don't even know what
That's
90.6 is, man.
That's the station of our rivals WVUM.
Oh jeez, man.
90.6.
The N stands for no.
Nope. Our arch rivals in independent radio on FM radio.
Okay, or AM radio.
Or they're not on AM radio.
Golly.
There is no is there
90.5 AM? No.
No, there's not.
No.
It's not any of that. I mean, that's like the incredible low end of your dial.
Yeah. I won't mention them again. I promise. I promise you.
Yeah. So that is an interesting theory. And I think that could be the case. But then again, who knows? Because they're just number stations. They're number stations, and it is inherently creepy to hear the sort of melody, or these, in the case of one of them, just gongs.
Gongs, yeah.
Just I get reminded of some avant-garde electronic music that was released yesterday.
No, that's what I'm saying. This could be used as samples for whatever, because this already sounds like a lo-fi whatever. It's interesting, creepy, interesting, intriguing. I like it.
It is interesting. You kind of forget how I mean, I don't forget because I was not around when the Soviet Union was
You sure about
thing.
that?
Yeah, I'm positive. I didn't
1991? No.
No, 92.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
I'm not that old.
We're all old here, man.
Yeah,
It's okay. Don't worry.
the way
my back.
the way I gauge how old someone is whether or not they were born while the Soviet Union was a country.
Okay, that's good.
That's another weird thing. I've always thought
if they were alive when Cheers was still.
I've encountered people who were born in Czechoslovakia and people who were born in the Soviet Union, and I just have this burning question: what is it like to be born in a country that doesn't exist anymore?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Because
interesting food for thought. If any of you guys, by chance, happen to be from a non-existent country, please let us know. We'd love to know your existential crisis.
That's what it's all about, especially with these number stations. The existential crisis is the deepest. It's the most genuine. I think, I don't know.
And the most palpable.
Yeah, but it's not.
You can hear it.
You could hear it, but with an existential, it's just kind of it's your existence.
Sure, yeah.
It's part of it is becoming aware of your existence, and that's I could go on a whole little thing about existentialism, but as just as a baseline, it's about like sort of an awareness of your existence. And obviously
of your government.
An awareness of your existence is not like is not like an enlightenment.
Right.
That's is very much the opposite. It's just
dreary.
Like it makes you like pull the curtain back and like really reevaluate your life and how kind of meaningless your endeavors are, in a sense. That's one interpretation.
And that's what the most scary thing about all of this is.
Yeah, that's spending so much time obsessing over this. I mean, it is very interesting to talk about now, but I can only imagine.
If you have a little fun, that's all. To folks there, I guess that's all what matters.
Yeah, if it's fun, then yeah, which I'm sure it is fun. I mean, it's
Yeah, I mean, I'm having fun right now. Yeah.
I'm having a good time because this is honestly like I had heard a bit of like about number stations, but it was only now that I actually heard the number stations.
The first time actually hearing them.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
The first time actually hearing them, because it is much different than just reading about them.
Of course.
And I think that's the beauty of this show right now, that we get to present it in the context that they were meant to be presented, and that's a very interesting concept. But yeah, it's just infinite. I could see why you've sat on this for so long, because you've been really itching to talk about this, because it is something that like it's something incredibly like bizarre,
right? And
like I can't think of anything, especially horror wise, I can't think of anything more like esoteric.
Sure. Like, and the thing is, when I guess I was kind of like subconsciously looking for something like this when I first found out about it. I wanted to know more about like the dark side of radio, the dark radio, if you may, kind of like the dark web or something.
The thing is, like, there is a dark.
Yeah, because doing this for a while, it gets me interested in how things are. What how the medium of radio keeps things together, but also how the medium of radio can conceal things from the public to a very scary extent.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like so it's so interesting, because if you think about it, like, radio is more than any other medium like just all enveloping.
Of course. Every
time you go out, you're walking in radio, because it's just these radio waves are just miles and miles of just like long waves just emanating out of towers, and they emanate out of towers like light,
right,
from a light bulb. But it's even more so because they could reach all sorts of nooks and crannies. And I think the most disconcerting thing is that they could reach space.
Yeah,
they could still maintain the same frequency in space. And right now, what's being broadcast is going to be, flung into space eventually, and it's just going to keep going.
This stuff is always interesting. Me.
Will it be heard by any
by any aliens?
By any alien creature that's,
or by the ISS?
The sheer scale of the universe is itself horrifying.
Yeah.
It ties into the whole existential insignificance, but like, if aliens were to like be looking at us from say, I believe like Betelgeuse right now, around there, or even Alpha Centauri, one of the next major star systems, if they would be looking at us through like a telescope, they would be bound obviously by light. The light has to reach that telescope. And what they would probably be seeing right now, if they look directly where we are on Earth, they would be seeing like the Triassic period.
Sure.
They'd just be seeing a lot of Stegosaurus going around.
We're all Stegosauruses, man.
No, we're not. Stegosauruses were. You know that
man. I just want to be one so bad.
You don't have. Yeah, you want to be one because you know what? One of my favorite paleontology facts is that the tail, the tail with the spikes of a proper Stegosaurus.
Yeah.
That's called a thagomizer.
I don't know why that made me laugh.
It's because it's
sounds like a weapon.
It is a weapon. That's the thing. It was a weapon to dig into the.
Let me show you my thagomizer. I don't.
It just whacked that thing around, and it was meant to, like forest and like Allosauruses.
God.
That's another the scale of time too, so like the amount of time that is between us and like a Tyrannosaurus Rex walking around, that's the same amount of time between a Tyrannosaurus Rex and a Stegosaurus.
Oh wow, jeez. Tying back to actually the discussion on the on like the dark side of radio. I don't know if you remember this, but in Pokemon Gold, one thing that I loved doing, was going to the ruins of Alph.
Yeah.
Turning on the radio and you hear like the strange frequency. I think that's kind of like what tuning into fine number stations is kind of like, like hearing like this sort of super eerie sort of sounds, and it's just weird. It's weird, but that's why I'm attracted to it, I guess.
Yeah, because
speaking of Pokemon,
it's a whole different element that unless that I wasn't really cognizant of until like I really started getting involved in the radio. That the radio is always happening.
Always.
The radio is always happening. Not like it's happening physically in and around you.
Of course.
Due to the to how large radio waves are, but it's always happening in the background. And if everything seems fine, in your field of vision, everything, you could always turn on the radio and something will be possibly a little more unsettling.
Right.
But yeah, I guess we could go a little like lighter. I've been wanting to talk about Pokemon for
please do.
For some reason.
Please do.
For that actually brings me to the whole like Chernobyl and Cold War, etc. thing. Actually brings me to one of my favorite fan theories about Pokemon.
Oh yeah.
In that the original version, the red and blue, or red and green, that first generation actually takes place in the result of the fallout of a massive war.
Really?
And this actually makes sense. So first of all, just look at Kanto. I don't know, like, if anyone has ever played the games, you'll know that even though you had fun with it maybe as a kid, if you really go back and revisit it, you will see that the Kanto region is kind of a dump.
It's quite empty.
No, it's empty, but that's one thing. But think of like
technical limitations,
one of the most,
man.
Think of
Game Freak did their best.
Think of so poison type Pokemon are one of those prominent types of Pokemon in
Red.
Kanto.
Yeah.
In Kanto, and what does that say about the environment? We're just running into like literal piles of sludge on the side, on the side of the road in multiple areas.
Bugs everywhere, beetles.
Just kind of poisonous bugs, sludges.
Snakes.
If you go in the water, nothing but poisonous jellyfish.
Damn, yeah.
You go into a cave, nothing but poisonous bats. Everything is
poison everywhere, man.
Everything is tainted because Kanto is incredibly polluted. There's not a lot of greenery. The most greenery you're gonna find is in the Safari Zone, and that's like a man-made complex.
I go to Miami Beach.
Yeah, it's a man-made complex, like not even necessarily to preserve nature. It's a game hunting preserve.
Sure.
But
Kanto is a dark history, man.
It's a very dark history, and it only gets darker when you consider that how many men are in the game.
How many men?
Men. I'm talking about like adult men.
Brock.
Yeah.
Red.
Yeah.
Gary.
Yeah.
Oak.
Gary's not a man. He's.
What do you mean? Oh, okay. You mean like adult?
Yeah.
And not male. Okay.
Yeah. Also, Brock is not like a technical adult.
Kinda. I mean, he seems old enough to go to college.
Yeah. The point is, there's not like a lot of people, especially like men. There's a lot of people just hanging out on the sides of roads. People who should have occupations but are just like
kids,
just kids, like engineers, like everybody's just out of work, and everybody's just hanging out the side of the road because the economy has gone to hell. It's because this is it's the
like you literally got to be fighting people to get money.
Yeah, it's the result of a previously unmentioned kind of world war between regions that has occurred.
Jeez.
Not too long ago, and the protagonist of that game is of the first generation to really not have an idea of what it was like to lived through the war.
Right.
And the glut of poison Pokemon everywhere in every environment, shows how how polluted Kanto was. It shows through the lack of people
Yeah.
in general. Like you'd think like with a place.
Yeah, I haven't played it in a while. Honestly.
Kanto has a lot of negative space.
Yeah.
And I know like that's because of programming limitations, because it was programmed by like 2 people.
Sure.
And it was programmed by 2 people. That's part of the reason there's so many glitches, is because they had to stuff so much in there. And the guy who stuffed in Mew, under the table, could have easily crashed the game, because that's how tight the memory was.
Jeez.
In that game, that if he
That's
had,
quite scary too. I don't
Yeah.
want to lose my memory.
yeah, if he had losing memory is no joke. I lost the memory on one of my flash drives. And it's been a difficult time getting some of those files back.
Yeah, I guess.
But I think the point I'm trying to make is Kanto is not a pleasant place. The only reason it seems like a pleasant place is because you play as a kid. And as a kid, you're just walking around. You don't realize like, oh, there should be more than like 4 people walking around the biggest city in the entire game.
You got a cute little rat,
You got a cute rat.
That's all.
And plus, there's not a huge diversity of Pokemon either.
Yeah.
A lot of the rarer Pokemon.
151 is pretty
Yeah.
fair.
It's implied that a lot of the rare Pokemon are like almost completely endangered in a lot of ways. Farfetch'd is like the ultimate example of like something that's practically extinct in the wild.
That sounds pretty far-fetched, man.
Yeah, it's something that's practically
Yeah.
its Pokedex entry says that it's so delicious that it's practically extinct. And the only way you could get one is through-
delicious.
Yeah. It comes with its own seasoning though. It holds a leaf.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's dark.
Yeah,
Never
that-
thought of it that way.
So, those are like, and to my knowledge, you can't catch one of those in the games. So it's for Lapras you get as a gift.
No, I
And-
mean like honestly, Kanto had some of like the darkest stuff in all like the Pokemon games. Yeah, Hypno was from the first one, right?
Yeah,
Kanto.
Hypno was from Kanto.
Stealing children.
With it's a cool design, by the way. At least with the Drowsy, really interesting, like sort of chocolate dip banana taper thing.
I've never heard it described like
What?
that.
That's what it is.
Chocolate banana. Yeah.
Chocolate dipped upright.
You forgot the pendulum.
Like no, I'm talking about Drowsy, the pre-evolution.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah, Drowsy has like the brown pants.
He's like a chocolate.
But
banana
Hypno's like a
elephant.
man. He's like man.
Yeah, I mean, here comes it's always weird to me how those Pokemon can like, when they evolve, do they magically gain those accessories, or do they have to like fashion like whatever accessories does it?
Well, like
Does an
Jigglypuff
Abra-
and her marker.
Yeah, but that's not part of the Pokemon.
Sure.
I'm talking about like, you never see like a Kadabra walking around without a spoon.
Yeah.
Does the spoon just kind of like naturally come about?
And they find the spoon.
Yeah, where are you just gonna find a spoon?
To ransack someone's house.
That's another thing about that generation, that like, first of all, even the ghosts are poison.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. This was before Ghost was a thing, right?
No, it was, but they were
Oh.
all poison types.
Oh, okay, that's weird.
So just a complete glut of poison types,
Right.
and which isn't itself scary. The point is, like, I think part of the reason subconsciously people were so like happy for the next generation of games is because Johto is the complete opposite.
Sure.
It's a utopia of nature.
Yeah.
It's actually funny how little of the sort of like pollution like seeped into Johto.
Yeah, even though it's quite close to it. You
But-
could go to Kanto if you want.
Yeah, I mean the point is Pokemon is not very like. Of course, I'm really reaching for a lot of this, but I do, after way too much time thinking about Pokemon, after shirking many of my responsibilities to think about Pokemon in depth, I do truly believe that there is a very serious sinister underbelly
Yeah.
that that would become completely apparent if on the in the offhand chance that they were to make something with like a slightly older protagonist or something.
Red when he's older.
Red when he's but he's just like
Red when he's in the retirement home.
when he's in the retirement home.
Make that game, Nintendo. You know what to do.
But they there's never been a and again, I understand that a lot of the reason there were like barely any people is because of programming limitations, but it still does seem interesting that even when they remade the games, they kept the same number of people.
That is interesting. Well, yeah, consistency,
Consistency. And also, I mean, I don't know. With Pokemon also, I've had this this thought about like the scariest Pokemon type.
Yeah.
Obviously, everybody wants to say Ghost, and that's wrong. Ghosts.
I think I know what you're gonna say.
I'm gonna say it, but just
Poison?
just hear me. No, just hear me out here.
Dark?
No. Here, the scariest type is a fairy.
Oh, okay.
And if you don't know fairy, it was a type introduced in
Gen 6.
Generation 6, and functionally speaking, it was meant to like balance out like dragons, because dragons are obviously too powerful in many respects.
Yeah.
Because they're dragons.
That's the point, yeah.
That's that's the point of them. Is supposed to be the best, but yeah, fairies are actually very scary. Like ghosts can be mischievous too. Ghosts aren't necessarily evil.
Mm-hmm.
They could be creepy just because by the nature of being dead. It's pretty creepy. But fairies are just bad.
It's too powerful.
I mean, fairies are evil. I'm thinking that these Pokemon are not based on like sort of the dainty, Tinkerbell kind of fairies, wish granting fairies.
No, they're more
I'm
like
thinking
the
more
fairy, like what was it? The fairy godmother from Shrek.
Nope, not even. They're not fairy godmothers or anything. They're based on the type itself.
Like pixies.
No, well, the type itself is based on pixies, but not in the sense that like we would think of pixies, like in the sense of the
here comes your man.
No, of the fairies of kind of Irish and Northern European mythology. I'm thinking like there are pixies.
I'm thinking more of like the
banshees.
Right.
Banshees and Doolahans.
Like the Grimm's fairy tale fairies. Yeah. Like the ones that like snatch kids.
Yeah.
Like
obviously, I brought up banshees. That's not a pleasant kind of fairy. They're jerks. Really, they're jerks. Doolahans.
Well, it's just the name banshee.
Yeah. There's a reason that we think of the word banshee as like a derogatory term. It's a very unpleasant kind of fairy.
Yeah.
And
you should just hear him for loud folks.
And there's also
like screaming like a banshee.
There's also the Doolahan, which is like as scary as the Grim Reaper, like a headless.
Was the Grim Reaper headless?
No, the Grim Reaper isn't headless. But Doolahans are headless, and they're sort of like harbingers of death. And they're fairies.
They're more scared of us than we are of them. We have spiders and snakes. Yeah.
Fairies are scary. All right. Just read a little bit up on the Irish and Norse mythologies.
You gotta explore your mind,
and you'll find that. And
why are you so frightened by fairies?
And you'll find that fairies are. I don't actually know how a lot of this.
Could you even watch Fairly Odd Parents and not like scream?
It's well, I'm probably gonna scream now because the show hasn't really aged that well in many respects.
Oh yeah, it's still going, isn't it?
It is still going.
Butch Hartman.
Yeah, Butch Hartman.
The fall.
The fall of the show. I mean, there's many reasons why.
Not even the fall of the show. The fall of Butch Hartman.
That's true. There's many reasons why a show like that maintains on the air. There's
it's like really, SpongeBob, Family Guy.
There's no like really artistic integrity with that.
No, that is scary. It's the scariest thing of all.
Yeah, the lack of artistic integrity. I mean, I wholeheartedly believe. It's something I'm kind of like actively trying to combat
That's good.
when trying to sort of direct music
Mm-hmm.
on a college radio station. I've recently been into sort of dissecting the music of classic college radio. And by classic college radio, I mean the 80s. The 80s is when college radio really came into its own, because that's when music entered college radio.
Mm.
Prior to that, college radio was mostly, news and sports. So in a sense, sports has a much longer history in college radio.
Sure.
But, music obviously entered the picture, and, a big element of that obviously was, I guess for the purposes of this show, goth,
Mm.
which does get a bad rap for
So
just
like,
being...
what, Marilyn Manson? No.
No,
Probably not.
Marilyn Manson was...
Chemical Romance.
So they sort of adopted kind of goth imagery.
I get goth and emo confused.
There's some overlap, but they kind
I
of
can imagine.
Adopted goth imagery. But what's essentially happened with goth is that you had, in the late 70s, you had punk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And punk was almost immediately like breakating into like all these different strains, and one of them ended up being like out of post-punk,
Mhm.
the ambiguously named genre.
Yeah.
Out of that, some of the punks decided to just sort of like wear sort of more, I don't know, like a Victorian clothing, and sort of like adopt like sort of lyrics inspired by more gothic writers and more classic horror stories,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of like really adopt that image as their own. The music itself actually could be fairly upbeat, even if the subject matter is not
Bubblegum goth.
bubblegum goth. You could say that maybe The Cure came out with like some examples, like In Between Days could easily be an example of like bubblegum goth, where it's got this like very jaunty...
That's not a term, is it? I
it
just
is.
made that up.
You did invent that, but it's a good one.
Okay. Anyone listening out there, you're welcome.
Where it's got this like jaunty melody,
Yeah.
but the lyrics are about how heartbroken he is. Part of being goth, though, is about being very outwardly melodramatic.
Sure.
There's not like being like truly dramatic is...
Yeah, there's a theatric
It's not gothic.
aspect
It is
to it,
very theatric, Also,
Which,
like,
I think there probably is
a
some
lot of-
overlap with like Marilyn Manson.
a lot of a lot of the best goth lyrics are like in The Cure, with In Between Days, or one that like specifically jumps out to me when the great Ian Curtis of Joy Division
Mm-hmm.
just proclaims like, I'm ashamed of the person I am, just out of nowhere on the song Isolation on the album Closer. That to me is about it's about like sort of broadcasting your sadness.
Mm.
And in a way, goth is not really that scary.
Sure.
Because goth is sort of taking the elements of what we would think of as scary, like the elements that we would like be afraid of, like death and isolation and sadness and all that,
Yeah.
and sort of like wrapping it up and sort of making it an identity and celebrating it. That's part of the joy that I think of Halloween
Mm-hmm.
in general. They're sort of like, even if it's like watered down and commercialized today, in a sense,
Sure.
we're celebrating a more sinister aspect of our lives, because like plenty of
Still gotta watch Great Pumpkin though.
you still have to watch A Great Pumpkin.
You gotta watch it every year. That's how it is.
The best Charlie Brown
Oh, you think
special. I think it's like up there. I mean, Charlie Brown Christmas is also pretty good.
so? Sure. Yeah.
Not Charlie Brown Thanksgiving.
It's all right.
No, I don't
Thanksgiving's all
I
right.
don't think Charlie Brown Thanksgiving is good. The Great Pumpkin, though, I mean, like, I'm always like, I was upset. I really wish that the Great Pumpkin was actually real, because like he seems much better.
And poor old Linus, man.
And poor old Linus, I mean, he's like steadfast in his convictions. It's not
Gotta give it to him.
I gotta give it to him. I mean, what is scary about Halloween is that like my addiction to candy.
Oh, yeah, it's true.
Yeah,
I'm not really that into candy these days, honestly. Yeah. I'll eat it, but it's, yeah.
I've had dental work done as a direct response, as a direct result of eating Halloween candy.
Cavities.
Well, not just cavities. I had a dental inlay, in, like one of my molars, and I was eating a caramel apple pop.
Ooh.
And like I was just eating it, and I was having a great time.
Yeah, but I can imagine how that went.
I was having a great time in the thing, and the caramel was so sticky that it yanked the whole thing out.
Oh.
It yanked the whole thing out, and then I had to go to the dentist, and then I got lectured for an hour.
Dang.
About not eating what is obviously a loose tooth remover.
What's also scary is going to be all the price gouging.
That's true, yeah. Well, that is true. The price gouging. It's my dental health versus my like sheer addiction to sugar. Because I do eat an excessive amount of sugar.
Do you plan to dress up this year?
I haven't had like a good costume really that much in recent years.
I haven't done it since I was like 12.
My last big costume was a semi-obscure one, because that's all my costume ideas. Because I'm not just gonna go as anyone.
Yeah, sure.
I dressed up as a Homestar Runner a few years back.
Really?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, you do know Homestar Runner.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So, good. Yeah, I mean, sort of cult internet cartoon from way back at this point. It's a fantastic series. I mean, in my opinion, it's one of the finest pieces of internet animation.
It's interesting though. It goes something else obscure this time around, man. Yeah.
But that's
I believe you.
I don't think it's that obscure though. But that's just me. I live in my own world. But yeah, it's I went as him. I had to paint my whole body white, and I had like a propeller cap that I made, and I wore like white pants.
Nice.
And it was a great costume, honestly. And I don't think I have any photo evidence of it, so which is upsetting. But you know, you don't always don't always need to have.
I mean, you can't convey a picture through a audio, anyways.
You don't always need to have like pictures, or even recordings.
Yeah.
Of shows. The way I see it, like. Yeah. Sometimes things just have to be experienced in the moment, and that's the most authentic way to experience them.
Absolutely, like right now.
Absolutely, right here, right now.
Just being here in the moment and everything, you know.
Anyone listening back on this is experiencing it in an inauthentic way.
Of course, and I hope y'all have been sticking around throughout the whole time. If you have any last-minute texts, by the way, because I think we're going to wrap up in a bit, please text us at 786-309-8861. Once again, that's 786-309-8861. And, any last thoughts?
No, last thoughts. Oh, man, time flies.
Yeah. Already an hour and 12 minutes in.
Yeah, time flies. Wow. I guess our main theme is, we've had, like, a really good time sort of, finding a way to make our own fears, like, entertaining for us. Because obviously, like, number stations are pretty frightful. And that's just how I feel about them.
So do I. That's why I brought him here, man.
Yeah. But it also is a good thing that we could have a nice chat about them. We could when we really like step back, we're like, oh, these are fun after all. Yeah. They're but when you're like alone.
Yeah, if I was doing this alone, I might. Yeah.
Like I might be a little scary. Or imagine if you're doing it here, but. And I was here also, but I wasn't saying anything. I was just looking at you from the corner. So, context is everything. Positioning is everything.
Yeah.
In life, I did want to talk like maybe one one at the end of just like trying to make this start of stuff entertaining with the creepy pastas
Oh yeah.
on the internet.
Yeah.
If you don't know what a creepy pasta is, it's a copy pasta that's scary. If you don't know what a copy pasta is, it's not a meal. Although I think of it as a meal, like whenever I
Meal for the mind.
like meal for the mind. Like when I think of creepy pasta, I think of like some sort of like kind of spicy pasta with like some sort of spooky like skull in it or something. It probably tastes good though. I would think so.
You might be wrong about that.
Look, don't
knock it till you try it.
don't knock creepy pasta until you've had it. But the point is, so copy pasta is like a meme. So somebody writes something on a forum. It could be a story or some sort of rant or something, and then the copy pasta is people just referencing that exact same block of text everywhere on the internet. And these get pretty involved when you enter the world of creepy pastas. And there's creepy pastas about like any sort of franchise of media you've ever imagined. I think obviously one of the most famous ones is the whole going back to Pokemon, the Lavender Town.
Yeah. We told that story last year, actually. The Lavender Town Syndrome and the Ben Drown story.
Yes, those two. There's also a particularly...
Taking me back now.
There's also a particularly scary one about The Simpsons. That
I think I know about that one.
Yeah.
Bart is dead.
Yeah, no, Bart dies.
Bart dies, man.
And it's like the story. I mean, it's such a stupid...
No one ate his shorts. He died.
It's so stupid. Like... The exposition for it is like, so we asked Matt Groening. It's the only thing he's never talked about, and yet you're gonna take the word of some person on like an internet forum that like to be the authority on this particular thing. But that's that's the magic of storytelling in a sense, because we like how easily we suspend our disbelief that this is actually a super scary story.
Yeah, you drop the cynicism and you're in for a good time.
And you're in for a bad time. I was honestly
bad
like,
time. You're gonna have a bad time.
I actually did have a bad time because like it was actually a really well written description of how upsetting this episode was. It was just like very deeply, because there wasn't any gore or anything, but it
was disturbing.
It really dealt with like what would happen in The Simpsons with like the aftermath of one of the main characters dying.
Jeez.
Like the real aftermath, like the actual like pain and trauma and all that happening.
Mm-hmm.
There actually is an in-universe example of that though.
Really?
A canon example, yes.
They referenced it.
That actually ends in death.
Wow.
There's a Frank Grimes.
Really?
Frank Grimes is a new employee in one of the classic seasons, somewhere in like season 5 or 7.
Mm-hmm.
You could correct me because I'm not as much of a encyclopedia about Simpsons lore as some other people are, but it's within the classic range of Simpsons seasons. And a guy named Frank Grimes comes in and joins the nuclear power plant where Homer works.
Right.
And the idea is that he is the only normal person, like he's a real person in attitude and everything, but he has to live in Simpsons world, and he has to like deal with basically Homer living his like his own existence, and he's driven mad because obviously Homer like is absolutely incompetent, but he has a job which pays well and also requires at least a master's degree. He's a safety inspector. I don't know if you forget what he actually does on The Simpsons, but he's like
I don't see The Simpsons, man.
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't.
Really?
No.
It's interesting.
I don't watch TV, man.
It's,
I filter feed.
You filter feed your media?
I filter feed my media. That's how it works.
No. Well, those.
What do you mean you don't filter feed? Man?
No, those classic. I'm not a sponge. I don't. Sponge.
You gotta be a sponge.
Sponges are creepy. Actually, sea urchins are creepy too.
Yeah.
Like Cnidarians are creepy. That's like the group that includes like sand dollars, starfish and
Sure.
urchins because they move.
Oh, Patrick frightens me.
They move, and that's insane to me that this thing that looks like a decorative piece like actually moves and eats things.
Yeah.
There's you could do time lapses of like a bunch of sea stars and clams and whatnot in like a bed, and you could see them actually moving, and they're like starfish predators, these huge like with 10 tentacles, where they're just like kind of like comparatively just steamrolling over everything and eating lesser starfish.
Yeah.
Also, the interesting fact about starfish, they have like what I believe is called pentalateral symmetry.
Yeah.
They how we have like bilateral symmetry.
Sure.
Theirs is divided into like fifths, which is just a bizarre.
Golly.
If you want to like know how closely related to a creature you are, like just first of all just think of like how many legs do you have.
Mm-hmm.
If something has more or less than 4 legs, you are so distantly related to something that you might not even want to feel bad about eating it, honestly. I know that's a really hot take right now, but
How about that? So for some food for thought.
that's some serious food for thought.
Yeah.
Like whether or not it's okay to eat animals that cannot share the same capacity for pain as you.
Some good final thoughts you got there.
It's true. That's a serious line of reasoning. The for capacity of pain. Some could say human-like pain, but just pain in general, is that if a creature can't have that, then is it okay to eat them?
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
You have a
Questions
rebuttal for that?
I don't have a rebuttal for that right now. I mean, it's some interesting food for thought, definitely. I just haven't thought about any of these things so deeply.
I don't want to turn this into like a philosophy seminar.
We can in another episode.
That's true.
That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Check us out in our later episode where we discuss animal ethics and Peter Singer.
Peter, WVUM's music director and host of Electric Kingdom Live, everyone.
Thank you. It was a good time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed doing this today. It was a lot of fun and had some spooks, had some laughs,
There were some spooks.
Talked about starfish.
We found some spooks in some very unexpected places.
Yeah.
All the time.
I really enjoyed it. So anyways, thank you all for joining us tonight. We will be back in 3 weeks for our next episode, which will actually be our pre-midterm episode. So, of course, it is going to feature, as I mentioned earlier, politics.
Whoa.
and your favorite topic. And, we are going to be talking about the midterms and everything, how everything is stacking up. And who knows, we may actually have some good old-fashioned legal advice of that episode. And, of course, Andy is going to be joining me again. Very much looking forward to it. Friday, November 2nd at 7 p.m. Feel free to tune in then. And
I just have one more thing to
go
say.
for it.
So, midterm elections, midterm exams.
Oh,
If you're a student of any kind.
why you got to do this to me?
Yeah, sorry, that's the real horror.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but
I'm slumping back into anxiety.
just remember, like, being sort of like apolitical.
Yeah.
Is being an idiot in the truest sense of the word, because idiot was used as sort of a term in ancient Greece, ancient Athens, to describe somebody who was like self-absorbed, because they didn't care about the general populace or the well-being of anyone else. They were just idio is like a prefix that means like self.
Yeah.
So they were just sort of self-absorbed, and they're an idiot. So obviously that's through centuries that's evolved into a term for somebody who's stupid, because why if you're not at least even partially engaged in politics, then you're not just not having other people's interests at heart, you're not having your own interests at heart, because politics does affect you, whether or not you think it does.
That's right.
So don't be
And
an idiot.
life lesson for today's episode: don't be an idiot. Anyways, thank you all for joining us. What I'm actually going to be playing right now, as we stop talking here, is another number station. It's called Siercilia. It is said to have broadcasted from Romania. And there's an interesting musicality to this particular number station that I wanted to show off. So thank you all for joining us today. My name is Israel.
And my name's Peter.
And, well, keep it locked.